Tell me there's something better. Go ahead, try. How I Spent My Summer Vacation by Peter Benjamin Parker. I can sum it up in one glorious, hyphenated word. Spider-Man. I am the spectacular Spider-Man!
For joining me here today as we get to talk about one of my favorite subjects, comic books. My name is Jose. I love comic books. I love talking about them, and I love sharing them with you. Feel free to follow me on social media if you would like. Links are in the description below. I've also posted a link to the Marvel fan site that I have plot synopsis and character bios for this issue. So I was going to... I've already uploaded one of the first part to this. I was only able to get 2 issues. But I'm hoping this time I'm able to do the entire Spectacular Spider-Man 139 through 142, the Tombstone run. Sal Buscema had I think, in my opinion, a fantastic run on Spectacular Spider-Man after Thor. Sal Buscema, rest in peace, passed away last week as of this recording. And I wanted to do sort of something about this. So I wanted to do his first few issues of Spectacular Spider-Man. He had a very lengthy run on Spectacular Spider-Man, about 8 years. And this dude is a workhorse. Beautiful art. And so I'm hoping to be able to get this thing going here without spending too much time on it. So we are going to give it a start here with a beautiful cover here by Buscema. This issue is going to give us the origin of Tombstone. So even though the splash page doesn't really say that or doesn't show that, because it starts out with an action splash page, we are going to see in the little lettering here that Peter Parker sits down to dinner with his wife Mary Jane. He gets a call from Daily Bugle editor-in-chief Joe Robertson asking him to come down to his office immediately. Sensing trouble, Peter changes into Spider-Man, and Webb slinks to the Daily Bugle en route. A sniper tries to take him out at him, but misses thanks to his spider sense. So Spider-Man is going to go after the shooter and webs up his escape route and demands that he talk. When the man refuses, Spider-Man knocks him out and webs him on the end of a flagpole. When the shooter comes around, Spider-Man scares him into talking, and he learns that he was a blind hire to take a hit on Joe Robertson. With this information, Spider-Man leaves the shooter to the police. That is not exactly how vigilantism works, but hey, this is comic books. And so he, again, leaves him for the police. He sneaks into Joe Robertson's office. Spider-Man finds no trace of Joe. However, he finds a recording addressed to Peter Parker. Peter will play the recording, and he hears Joe giving a confession to something that will end his career. The reason he decided to tell Peter is because he is a freelance photographer who doesn't have an agenda to protect Robertson or the Bugle. Much to Spider-Man's surprise, Joe confesses that he is an accessory to murder. More shocking, he says he is responsible for the deaths featured in a number of newspaper clippings involving the mobster known as Tombstone. Before he can listen to any more, Spider-Man is forced to leave with the recording when he hears Kate Cushing and J. Jonah Jameson coming. They thought they heard Joe's voice, but find no trace of him. This raises concern as Jonah and Kate have noticed that Joe has been acting strangely. We now go to the Kingpin's office tower. The Arranger demands that the mutant known as Roland Rayburn, that was of course, from the previous video, Feel free to check that one where I cover the first 2 issues of Buscema's run. So he wants him to work for the organization. Rayburn, of course, has the mutant power to make everyone kind of do what he says, kind of clairvoyance. Rayburn refuses to use his ability to influence people for criminal ends. Of course, that doesn't make the Arranger happy, and he has Tombstone rough him up and force him to comply. Roland attempts to use his power to convince the Arranger to let him go, but his power have no effect on Tombstone. The mob enforcer points out that the Arranger is being influenced. After shaking off Raymond's influence, the Arranger orders Tombstone to dislocate his arm. So they get a phone call from Joe Robertson. Tombstone takes the call and asks to leave to sort out some personal business. The Arranger thinks that he won't need Tombstone's service for the rest of the night. So when Tombstone leaves, the Arranger calls in a nurse to treat Roland's injury. The Arranger insists that Roland will eventually use his ability to help them, but Roland remains defiant. So elsewhere, Spider-Man is web-slinging across the city, listening to Joe's recording. Along the way, Joe Robertson begins talking about his connection to Tombstone. The tale begins decades earlier when Joe attended high school in Harlem. It was during his senior year he was he was an editor for the school newspaper and had recently been granted a scholarship to the Columbia School of Journalism. The most feared person in the school was a young albino. As I mentioned, Tombstone's an albino, named Lonnie Lincoln, a bully everyone called Tombstone. One day, after working late on the school paper, Joe always worked late, as we have seen, Joe was confronted by Lonnie about a story that Robbie was going to write about him in the paper. Lonnie demands to know what the contents of the article were. Robbie tried to put up a brave front, refusing to tell him. However, Robbie would Robbie gets beaten up by Tombstone. He beats him up into submission and convinced him to drop the story. From there, Lincoln would perversely consider Joe his friend. Isn't that something? All right. The next morning, Joe's teacher is concerned about that Robbie was quashing his story. So, that would be a little suspicious, even though she hadn't read it. Robbie insists that the story was a bust and that he was quashing it. However, Robbie had a difficult time with the idea of compromising his future. Although Tombstone thanked Joe for quashing the story, telling him that he does good work, Robbie vowed to never retreat on another story ever again. So, of course, 8 years later, Robbie was working late, because that's what he does, for a newspaper in Philadelphia. One night, he got a panicked phone call from a crook who had information on a recent murder of Ozzy Montana. Joe rushed to the meeting place and was horrified to see that his contact had been strangled to death. More shocking was the fact that the killer was none other than his old friend, in quotations, Tombstone. Joe tried to flee the scene but tripped over some barrels. However, when he regained his footing, Tombstone was long gone. He was so frightened he returned home to think about what to do next. That's when he got a phone call from Tombstone, whose only words were about how Joe does good work before hanging up. Fearing for his family's safety, Joe decided not to report the story. A month later, Joe and his wife moved to New York, where Joe takes up his job at the Daily Bugle. Over the next 20 years, Robbie followed the career of Tombstone and how he managed to escape prosecution by intimidating witnesses. He thought that he was out of Tombstone's reach until he recently saw Tombstone in New York, and that was back in Web of Spider-Man. Like I mentioned in the previous video, I really do like how interconnected these titles were. With his past catching up to him, Robbie began collecting articles on Tombstone's career to see if he could justify his silence. His feelings of guilt got worse when he had confronted Tombstone a few days earlier. Recently, he was at a pub that is frequented by reporters from the Bugle. He overhears Ben Urich talk about the rumors that were swirling around about Tombstone. He then snapped at Urich to do his job as a reporter and follow up on these rumors. I didn't do nothing, so you do it. So anyway, he then storms out of the bar, where he comes upon a newspaper box that had headline story on the increase of mob killings in the city. Robbie loses his temper and punches the newspaper box, doing nothing more than cutting his knuckles, because metal is always going to win. It was then that he vowed to end the shame once and for all by confronting Tombstone that very evening. Spider-Man goes into the Kingpin's office and basically he demands that the Arranger tells him about Tombstone. And so he does. And he's over at Battery Park meeting Joe Robertson. And so Joe is going to confront Tombstone here. Again, he whispers, and he's going to do a citizen's arrest. So he pulls the gun here. And that's not going to work for Tombstone. And he grabs Joey, and he's like, I'm not going to be afraid of you anymore. And he's like, for old time's sake, I'm going to give you a break. And boom, he cracks his back. This was shocking. I remember seeing this at the newsstand. I think we were at Albertsons back in Florida, and I had seen this, and I was like, whoa. Of course, Spider-Man arrives and sees Robbie's fallen body, and he's gonna help him out, but of course Robbie's like, don't touch me. He did it. He broke my back. And oh my God, look at that image. It is just something. So yeah, that concludes the issue. So of course we go right to the next one. So now we go to 140, and we got a very striking cover here. So we got Spider-Man on what would you call this? I am not familiar with gun language here. So whatever inside a is it a periscope or whatever? And I like it in front of the Statue of Liberty. And I'm always like, what is he? Is he on? Probably a helicopter, I would imagine, because there's nowhere to swing from there. Rendezvous with Death on the cover here. So I don't think I mentioned it on the previous issue, but is it Gerry Conway or Gerry Conway? I would imagine it's Jerry, but I always say Gary because of the G. His name's Gerald. So anyway, he is the writer. And one of the things is I know Gerry Conway. I'm just gonna say Gary, so I apologize if it's Jerry. But the English language and some letters, the G particularly having the J and the G sound. Letters should have one sound. And he was the writer in the Firestorm series over at DC Comics in the early and mid 80s, and I loved Firestorm. I still love. I think he's got the coolest visuals of anyone, and I love Firestorm. Anyway, he was the writer on the Firestorm ongoing series. And so, same creative team as before. Killzone is our title here, and so Spider-Man is looking here at Robbie. His family is here, and they're all looking. Feels it's his fault for not arriving on time to save him from Tombstone breaking his back, and so he changes into his secret identity here in a little alleyway. So we're gonna get a little bit of a recap here. And so here's Ben Urich, here's Jonah, and oh my gosh, I already forgot her name, but it'll come up here. So all right, and so his family, his wife and kids, and so Peter asks Ben, what's the story? And Urich tells him that the doctors fear that he'll never be able to walk again. So he asks Peter if he's known him a long time. And so they kind of walk out there and he says, yep, I have. So Ben knows that something's was preoccupying Joe for the past few days. And Peter sort of already knows what it is, of course. And so Peter plays dumb, but Ben's sure that Peter knows something because he overheard Joe calling him the night before the accident. When Ben asks what Joe wanted to talk about, Peter tells him that Robbie wasn't there when he arrived. But that doesn't satisfy him, but he tells Peter he'll get in touch with him when he decides to. So, and they leave here. And so we have Robbie here, and you can see Tombstone. So this kind of, would look like this is a dream of some kind, but it is not. And so he's like, long time no see. And he really is there. And so he reminds Robbie that while he works for the mob, he expects him to keep his mouth quiet. But of course, Robbie refuses. And so he starts whispering something to him, which of course you see his expression. And so he says, do we understand each other? And leaves him. Look at him. He is just frightened to death. So we don't know what exactly he said, but he definitely said something. So we go to a seedy bar, and I am always, strays. I feel terrible. I have one of these things where I'm very sympathetic toward animals more than I am toward people. And I know that sounds to some people listening like, oh, humans and whatever, but people have a choice. And people make decisions in life that ends them where they are, right or wrong. People have free will, but these poor animals. So, I always feel bad. I grew up in Puerto Rico where we have so many strays. It's an epidemic, and it's heartbreaking. But anyway, I digress because we're here to look at Buscema's beautiful art. But I just saw that he drew the strays in here. So anyway, we are in a a CD bar here where Spider-Man is trying to this is just anyway, get answers of who put the hit on Robbie. So beautifully, Buscema was so good here. And so he is asking and all that. So he grabs this guy and he's asking about Tombstone. This guy's getting ready to shoot. And he's like, who put the hit? And he's like, the arranger did it, and that he works for the Kingpin, and that Tombstone arranged it. And so the Spidey sense kicks off, and all of a sudden this guy here, and he goes down, and Spider-Man's like, huh, who did this? Who shot him? And so he's going to go after. He says there's something familiar about, and then his spider sense goes off. We're going to see who the guest star is coming up. And you see another missed shot here. And so anyway, and so he's just going to go deal with the arranger. And so I just like it. The arranger here, not Mr. Whatever. And so he is saying that the Roland Rayburn project is proceeding nicely. That would be, of course, the mutant. And so he says that there's going to, he's working on him. And suddenly the call is disconnected because, of course, you see Spider-Man is in there. So Spider-Man demands to know where Tombstone is, but the arranger says you won't do anything. Spider-Man's going to threaten that he's going to beat him up, and of course he says no, and then he touches a button and says everything's being recorded. I like it, on videotape. Such an 80s thing. And he punches the TV there, and so the guards come in and says Spider-Man was just leaving. So they go after him, but he of course makes his departure. So the Avenger's gonna go into a secret room here, and he makes a mention of it that they really should do something about Spider-Man, but that the Kingpin is obsessed with Daredevil. And so here's Rayburn, who is being injected with drugs to try to make him more compliant, to use his clairvoyance here. And so Tombstone shows up, and he says that Spider-Man is after him, and of course that was part of the plan that the arranger had. So sorry, not Spider-Man, someone else. They're being nondescripted. It's going to be the one that shot that guy in the thing. So anyway. And so at the hospital, Peter and Mary Jane go to see Robbie, and he's just not talking, not doing anything, and well, he is talking, but he's just has a kind of like, because of the whisper, so he's not really saying anything. Anyway, he says he wants to talk to Peter alone and asks that the other one step out here. And of course, his wife is like, "Oh, I can't lose him." And so Martha is the name of his wife, because Martha is the name of just about everybody here. But you can see she's taking it badly here. So now Peter and Robbie are going to talk. And so Robbie asks Peter to destroy the recording he made. And Peter's like, why? That guy's a murderer. The police never had evidence to nail him, but now he's like, I'm not asking you, he says. I'm telling you to destroy the tape. And then he tells him that Tombstone basically visited him the night before. And that he's going to, kill his family if that... and so he's tired of, but he's being victimized, I guess. So essentially, he threatened his family, his friends, everybody. He's like, I can't find him. I can't find him anymore. Please get rid of the tape. So Peter and MJ are leaving. So he tells her all about it, and she asks him what he plans on doing with the recorder, and he tells her that he doesn't know, um, but wants to talk with Ben Urich. So, but obviously they're unaware someone is spying on them. So when Peter arrives at the Daily Bugle, he asks Ben position on this situation without really revealing any of the details about the recording. Urich tells Peter that there are no hard and fast rules regarding ethical situations like that. And then he tells him that someone is calling for him. And we're not seeing who this is. But he tells him that he was called. He calls that number back, and you can see that he tells him that he knows about the recording and asks to meet him in Liberty Island in an hour. So he is going to go. And so we got kind of what we figured here. He was on a new helicopter because that's about the only way. There's nothing for him to swing. He lands on the torch, and suddenly someone throws a net here to try to catch him, but he gets out of the way here, and he's going down. Web swings through the Statue of Liberty, and it's going to go into the visitor center. I've never been there. Can you still go into there, or is that closed? I know that it was. And so now shots, and he's going to go look, comes out, the person's going. You can guess already who this is. Catches him. You should be able to know who this is. And of course, they tackle him, and it turns out that it is the Punisher. And so that ends that ends number 140. So here we go to 141. This is one of my favorite covers. Just the Punisher dismantling everybody. Just that is so cool. Yeah. Anyway, Buscema, good man, good on you, man. Rest in peace, my man. All right. And so here we see Spider-Man following this van here. That is the Punisher's van. And so he comes in, and Punisher says, "Let's talk." Look at all the weapons here. So Spider-Man isn't sure he can trust the Punisher, but Punisher has been following Tombstone across the country here. You can see that here on the pictures. And so he wants to know why he is in New York, and he believes Robbie has the answers. He also knows that Robbie made the cassette tape about and gave it to Peter Parker. And yes, you know Peter Parker, right? Yeah, and he says, He says, "I want that tape, Spider-Man, one way or the other, with or without you, your friend's cooperation, I'm going to get it." So the Tombstone's men know about the Punisher and his van. And so he tells them, "We're not here for revenge. The Ranger wants us to attract the Punisher's attention. That's all." And he says the Persuader will do the rest, which should be that mutant guy. So he's already got a code name here. They're going to wait till dawn. And he says, "My name isn't Mr. It's just Tombstone." So, all right. So the Punisher is going to tell him what his interest is. Of course, this is a war on crime, which never ends. And so he tells him that he's been tracking Tombstone for weeks after he after he murdered the St. Louis district attorney or deputy district attorney Harold Ullman. Just that is so awesome here, man. I, I like Buscema, or is it? Some people say Buscema, but anyway. Um, so, and there's no evidence to prove that Tombstone murdered Ullman. So, he just followed Tombstone to New York because there's never any evidence. So the Punisher says I can be very persuasive here, and so he finds out that he's in New York, and he went to follow him. Saw Spider-Man fighting. Saw this guy was gonna kill Spider-Man. Spider-Man shot him. Sorry, Punisher shot him, and just kind of went after Spider-Man, or just followed him. So Spider-Man says, "My spider sense had already helped me. You didn't have to kill him." He's like, difference in opinion. And so anyway, um, he called the Bugle, found out that he had been hospitalized, and of course he was the one that was following them. And instead of Parker, you showed up, and so he's like, but then you ambushed me. He's like, never lose the initiative, because he wasn't expecting Spider-Man. So, and he just continues, I want the tape. The tape really doesn't say anything. It would be hearsay. So nothing in there proves that, none of it is admissible in court anyway. But hey, as always, it's comics. And he says, it's not mine to give. He gave it to Peter Parker. And then Punisher is like, then I'll ask Parker myself. I'll tell him you said hello. And so Spider-Man says, hey, calm down. Robbie's been through a lot. Peter doesn't want to give him the tape without Robbie's say so. He'll chat with Peter Parker and see if Robbie can get him the tape. And so off he goes. Tombstone, of course, was watching it. And so he's like, the two of them maybe are working together. He says, maybe I'll find more after the business is finished. So, all right. I think of John Romita Jr. and Sal Buscema and all these old school, because John Romita Jr., even though he is still working in the field, I always find they're such great storytellers. It's not like modern day comic book artists where they don't give stuff. And Buscema, whose brother John had passed away quite a few years ago, come from that old school mentality. So, all right. And so you can see that Tombstone is about to make his move. And so Ben's going to go visit. He's smoking a cigarette in the hospital. So Ben is going to go visit Robbie. His son is there and tells him that there was no permanent damage to the spine. And after a little physical therapy, he'll be back to normal. And so he asks if he can talk to Robbie alone, which the son then, the dad says, yeah, go ahead. So a lot happens. So I'm going to narrate this to you very quickly because there's a lot of talky talk. Ben asks him for the recording or for the location of the recording. Joe tries to pretend like he doesn't know what Urix is talking about. However, Ben, of course, knows better. And so Ben is going to lay all the clues to prove his point. He understands that Joe's afraid, but tells him to talk. But Joe is not going to say anything. And so Ben leaves and he tells Robbie that he knows where to find him when he's ready to talk. And so, yeah, that's essentially quite quick. And so later you see the Punisher's making breakfast. He had a shower, sees the people coming through, and he throws the grease in there. Of course, this guy just bounces into the other guy And so next he throws the pan here, and so grabs the gun. Here's another one, shoots from behind. The Punisher is just brutal here. And so the lone survivor uh, tells him he's in the cloisters, wherever that is. I don't live in New York, so I have no idea. So at the Bedford Towers, which if you follow my Amazing Spider-Man, where with Todd McFarlane, you know what happens in there. Peter is sharing the recording with Mary Jane, and then after hearing it, he asks her what she thinks, and of course, she tells she will tell him that it's basically that she would destroy it as well. Um, so they just kind of talk, and he just can't bring himself to destroy it and will leave it up to Joe to make the decision here. And so he leaves, and she kind of ponders that how worried she is about his well-being and how dangerous a life he has as Spider-Man. So all right, so you can see Peter is leaving here, so he is at the Bedford Towers, but Tombstone is kind of knows about him too. So he walks into the tower looking for Peter because he didn't see Peter leave here, and so you of course see apartment 302. All right, so now we are at the cloister. It says here a 12th century monastery brought from Europe by the Metropolitan Museum. So, hey, now I know. And so there's the Punisher looking through. And so he is going to get in. And so the Punisher doesn't show anything, just the shot. So he kills both his assailants here. And jumps in looking for Tombstone here. More guards show up. And now we go to Mary Jane. And there is Tombstone. And she's like going to run away. But he grabs her. He's like, where's Parker? Look at him just lifting her down. And he's like, one way or another, you're going to tell me what I want to know. How much pain you suffer before you do is up to you. Think carefully. And of course, he's like, Peter Parker, where is he? So back to the Punisher fighting the mob here. Beautifully done by Sal. Very skilled. Punisher kind of getting beat up, but he's like, go ahead, try me, because the Punisher won't give up. And so that guy runs away. And so they're unknown that he doesn't know Tombstone's not there. So he opens the limo door, and it's the Arranger, and of course this is the Persuader, which is that mutant guy, and so he uses his mutant powers to kind of get the Punisher to do what they want, and he's like, drop the gun, so he does, and he's going to try to fight him, but he's like trying to then double down on his on his power, and the Punisher's like no, and he's like just continues, and look at this, I mean, bent over in half almost. It's very dramatic here. And so all right, and so Peter tells Robbie he's making a mistake, that he doesn't, that he's got Tombstone. When a nurse comes through, tells him that his wife's been hurt, she's in the emergency room, and Peter's gonna go look, and of course, and one will fall next issue. So we're almost done here. So this, I believe, is our final issue. No, I think we have one more issue to go that finishes the story arc. So 143 will be our final issue here. So, all right. And so great cover here. Tombstone grabbing Spider-Man. Absolutely beautiful here. And so we're going to have a showdown with Tombstone. So this sort of will end Tombstone for a few issues. There's more. This whole thing, Gerry Conway and Sal Buscema really, like David Michelinie, even after Todd leaves, they have a vision. They're really doing some really good stories. So it's not the last Tombstone story overall, but this arc sort of will end, or this issue sort of will end the Tombstone part. But there's one more that'll continue with the Punisher. So, all right, and so we are in Atlanta. Nice. Nice splash page here. And tonight we finish this one way or another. So we're going to get a recap of sort of what happened, looking for Mary Jane. And she's right there. And you see that she's got her arm hurt. And basically tells him about Tombstone going in there. And you can see that he breaks her arm or sprains it, and so he says there's a phone call on the public phone here, and it's Tombstone. Tombstone, how's your wife? And so he says, we're gonna meet me and you're gonna give me the tape, which again doesn't really matter because it's inadmissible because it's hearsay. So again, poor little stressed cat. And so he says next time it won't be her arm, I'll twist her little neck. And so he says, where? And he says, I hear you're doing a book signing, and so he's gonna do it in Atlanta. This goes toward a story arc in Amazing Spider-Man. So again, I love how they continue these issues here. And so now he's in Atlanta looking for Tombstone, and he says the 10th floor, which is where it was supposed to be. And so now we see the Persuader working on the Punisher. And so the next part is going to be just this, or the next issue is sort of going to be the Persuader trying to work on the Punisher, which was what they wanted. And so you can see the Persuader working really hard. And he falls down, but he just was not able to. He just took all his will. And he's like, you failed miserably. He says, think so? Look at him. And he sees that the Persuader did his job, and the Punisher now belongs to the Kingpin. So, all right. So, now we're gonna see some physical therapy for Joe, and I don't know they would do this so quickly, but hey, he just sees Tombstone. He's just not doing very well, and so he is going to try and attack him here, and then falls. And he's like, hey, I'm actually feeling really well, even though it strained him here. And so in Lansing, Michigan, we just see this woman leave a high school where she works and heads for her car. Kind of looks like Gwen Stacy in a way. You can see her putting the key in the car. That is how things were done in the 80s. And suddenly her car kind of like gets this thing, and you see this craft, and it's carrying two people with him. So she is you see that they try to shoot but make a thing, so she's gonna go through with it. And so they say, we lost her, activate the gene tracer. We found her once, we'll find her again. No way we'll lose her twice. And so you just see this. Peter will save her. Peter. So, all right. We're now back in Atlanta. He's got the recording. Spider Sense goes off. And here we go. Tombstone. And so we begin our fight. But Robbie here is got everyone here, and he is going to basically talk about everything that happened before. So he's gonna spill the beans here. We'll continue here with the fight. So pretty descriptive as to what it is. Again, done beautifully in just normal panels. It's just something you old school comics do that new comics just don't do. So, all right. Oh, sorry, I went too fast here. So he again continuing the story and about how afraid he was of Tombstone, but he's continuing the story here. And so we also then continue the fight. Tombstone is just a badass. And so the story of everything, kind of again everything we already know. So we'll just concentrate on the fight here. And there's the tape. But of course he's giving another interview, so this really is all for naught. And so he's going down, but he's surprised as Spider-Man kicks him, and he gets to his chance to get even for all that. So Tombstone gets ready, and Spider-Man just kind of moves out of the way. He ends up hitting this, and he's like, I'm gonna kill him. Spider-Man says, one question before we put this to bed. Why didn't you kill Robbie when you had the chance? He says, how could I kill him? Robbie's my friend. So it's a thoom, and down goes Tombstone. But of course, Spider-Man does not kill. So catches him. And then he's like, friend, huh? Define the term. So after he catches him, to slow him down, he lets it go, and he lands on that whatever this is. And so he goes down, he's got the tape, and he says, whatever's going to happen will be up to you. And so we end with this, and so before I arrived, asked Martha to call the Justice Department. I'll give them my deposition against Tombstone. After that, my legal situation could get complicated. I'm in a very real way, I'm an accessory to murder. Naturally, under the circumstances, I'll resign as editor-in-chief of the Bugle. I don't think that's how it works. You can't convict people without proof. You just, I don't know. I guess he could have. Well, no, that's true, because he could have turned in as a witness. I don't know, and so Jonas says he's not going to take his resignation. He's got a contract and show up on Monday, and he is going to, he's not fired. Of course, there's more to this story that will develop over time, but for now, the readers don't know that. So, now we've got the arranger here. He hears about Tombstone. He's like, that sucks, and sees him being arrested. He's like, what a waste. And so now he's got the Punisher here. He says, are you ready to assume your duties? He's like, affirmative. Just point me where you want to go. Just tell me who you want me to kill. And so we are now going to move on to finally the final issue of this arc. And so issue 143, and we've got the Persuader on the cover saying, you can't refuse the Persuader. Do it. Kill Spider-Man now. So Death in Dallas. So great panel. Great cover. Everything you want. I love during this time, during this era, where a cover actually showed you stuff that was happening in the inside, as opposed to just pinups. That's really all these stupid books are nowadays. Yes, I am an old man yelling at the kids to get off my lawn. So here we go. So we start with this action splash page. Spider-Man yelling, where is he? He's of course looking for the Punisher, and of course everybody's got a gun. So same credits. This guy leaves the other guy. And it turns out that these are just burglars and they have nothing to do with the Punisher missing. And Spider-Man's like, you guys are lucky it was me. And so we are going to now see that the Punisher is with the Persuader here and one of the Kingpin's henchmen here dressed in his uniform, just in a trench coat. This guard recognizes him and he's like, hey, you're the Punisher, of course. The that guy tells him, you know, these aren't the droids you're looking for, and he's like, okay. But this lady's kind of like a reporter, so she is gonna follow. And so here we see the Lobos brothers freed on mistrial, and of course the Punisher like, who do you want me to kill? So the arranger goes to the Kingpin to tell him about, we basically get a recap of everything. And here we basically says they're in Dallas. They're going to assassinate the Lobo brothers. Who? But then so we don't really get to know why they are going to kill him. But the Kingpin tells him that details no longer interest him. All he wants is Daredevil and his destruction, which he had already done, but in Born Again. And the arranger's like, oh, this is gonna come bite you if you continue like this. So, all right. So we go now to that woman, and so I'm just gonna give you a quick thing. So this is the Gwen Stacy clone from way back in Amazing Spider-Man 142 through 149. She was the one that was created by that Mike Warren, I believe. Now, her story is actually going to be completed in this year's annual, which I'm not really covering, but it is done by Gerry Conway. And essentially what's going to happen is they're trying to get her back. They eventually fail, and she goes in with the High Evolutionary. So her story is not going to be completed in it's just a lead up to the annual here. She's trying to get back to Peter, and you can see that they're trying to capture her, and she sort of gets away. So they keep looking for her, and off they go. So that's essentially what's going to happen. So she's the clone and ends up with the High Evolutionary. And just to give you a thing, I think it's Spectacular Spider-Man Annual number 8. It's part of the evolutionary war thing that Marvel had going on during this era. And so we now get a recap of everything happening, particularly Amazing Spider-Man 308, 309, with Jonathan Caesar, who had kidnapped her. So he is showing up at an upscale bar, and look at all these people hitting on her because, hey. And so she walks in, and he's kind of tired and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, I'm so tired, I would spend the next month in bed. And she's like, sounds like a plan. That's something comic book-ish or soap opera-ish. And as, she's talking to him, he hears about the Punisher. And they think, this has something to do with the Lobo brothers. And, of course, I got to go to Dallas. But why? And he's like, I'll call you from the airport. So... and so this guy's like, looks like we'll be eating alone after all. And so Peter leaving her always, the job comes first. So all right, so back in Texas, we're at a refinery, which is a front for the Lobo brothers drug smuggling. He's gonna make an example of this guy here, gunning down the guards in the facility here. And, so this is all kind of just part of that Kingsman plan. You can see that he's gonna dispose of this guy, but then all of a sudden someone that his people are shooting at. So he's like, this is stupid. This is an oil refinery. What do you think was gonna happen here? And I don't know if he blows up the entire thing or not, but it's kind of cool. Your loss. Very great big panel here. So, all right. So he uses his front as Peter Parker for that book that gets him to Dallas. So he thinks this will allow him to be able to um, find the Punisher. But then he asks about the Lobo brothers, and he's like, "Those are vicious men." So, and so we're gonna get kind of their origin. Lobo, by the way, is wolf in Spanish. And long story short, they eventually made their way to becoming the top drug dealers in South Texas. So here we are doing the web things, and so he is going to check turn into Peter, and then like a cosplay thing. And so all right, so he's gonna go into their mansion, or where the Lobos live, and here's the Punisher. Here are the Lobos, very hairy, and the Kingpin. You know, they're like, the Kingpin wants them killed, or at least the Arranger wants the Kingpin to kill, and Spider-Man's there, and of course they're like, kill Spider-Man, and so they're fighting. One of the shots hits this guy in the shoulder. They continue fighting, and they're the Persuader, the Persuader, the Arranger. It's just funny that these names here. So he's got Spider-Man here, and the Lobos have gotten away, and Spider-Man's like, yeah, so much for my great idea. He's like got super strength, for God's sakes. So Spider-Man gets out. This guy shoots, hits him in the side of the head, and the world goes to black. He comes through. They're like, kill Spider-Man. We got to get the Lobos, and they're like, kill him. And he's like, struggling. All of a sudden, you see a kapow, and he ends up shooting this other guy. He's like, so he's like, you never broke my will, you only bent it. And so he's gonna almost tell him, this isn't my idea, dude. But he ends up killing him. So because that's what the Punisher does. This man just evil, or and so he basically, Spider-Man's like, you just kill. He's like, this is what I do, man. And so Spider-Man gets away, and we're gonna deal with these Lobo brothers coming in other issues, but for now, this is it. So we have actually did Sal Buscema's kind of first big arc between the two videos. So I hope you enjoyed these. Rest in peace, man. Good stuff, and I always wanted to get to these, and I'm glad I got to do them. And who knows, it may be a while before I can do another long video like this. But anyway, Spectacular Spider-Man 139 to 143. Gerry Conway and Sal Buscema, I don't know really. Spell or pronunciations in English is kind of like whatever you feel like. So like and subscribe. I do thank you so much for listening. Rest in peace.